You're 5 days into your elk hunt. You've covered miles, checked the basins you marked all summer, glassed the obvious parks, listened at daylight, bugled into dark timber, and still nothing. No bugles, no fresh tracks, no elk on their feet. And at some point, every hunter starts asking the same question: why can't I find elk? Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to fix that problem with a repeatable system because a lot of hunters don't need a new call sequence first. They need a better way to diagnose what's actually happening. Elk don't just disappear, right? Feed changes, water changes, pressure changes, weather changes, and the way elk use country changes with it. So today we're breaking down how to stop hunting old expectations and start finding the current elk system. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years. I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I've spent many of my former years as an elite athlete, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter. But before you change drainages, before you blame the unit, and before you start throwing random bugles into every patch of timber you can see, you have to fix the first mistake a lot of elk hunters make when the hunt starts going wrong. They keep hunting memory instead of hunting current elk. And what I mean by that is simple. Elk were there in July. Elk were there on your trail camera. Elk were there last year. Elk were there when your buddy hunted it 3 seasons ago. Elk were there before opening weekend. Elk were there before pressure, before weather changed, before water dried up, before feed shifted, before bulls started separating, before cows started moving, and before other hunters started pushing through the country. That information all matters, but it's not enough by itself. Elk country isn't just a pin on a map, it's a living system. Feed changes, water changes, thermals change, human pressure changes, bedding security changes, and elk respond to those changes because survival demands it. So when you can't find elk, the first question isn't where were they supposed to be? The first question is what changed? Once you start asking what changed, the next step is to stop looking at elk country as one giant possibility and start breaking it down into the parts elk actually need to survive. This is where I want you to think in terms of an elk location equation. Elk need feed, they need water, they need bedding and security, they need travel routes between those pieces, and once hunting season starts, they need a way to avoid or escape pressure. The mistake is looking for one piece by itself and assuming that's enough. Commonly, that's food, you know? Hunters see a meadow and think, there should be elk here. They find water and think, this has to be good. They see dark timber or rubs and wallows or a bench on a map and assume they may have found the answer. But elk don't necessarily live just behind one clue. They live in a complete system. So instead of asking, is there feed here? Ask, where is the feed connected to water, bedding cover, wind advantage, and a pressure escape? That's the shift. Stop looking for isolated elk sign and start looking for the full elk system, because when those pieces all come together in the right season, under the right pressure, that's where your odds start climbing. And once you understand that elk are using a complete system, the next mistake to fix is trying to search too much country all at once. A lot of elk hunters open up a map and every drainage looks possible. Every north slope looks pretty good. Every basin has a meadow, a creek, a timber pocket, or a bench that looks like it could hold elk. And that's exactly why they get overwhelmed. They're not hunting a pattern yet. They're hunting possibilities. The first job is to narrow that current seasonal band, right? Elk are not equally likely everywhere in a unit. Where they were in July might not be where they are in September. Where they were during the rut might not be where they are during rifle season. Where they were before snow, heat, pressure, or feed changes happened might not be where they are today. So before you start dropping pins everywhere, ask better questions like, what elevation band should elk be using right now? Then ask what aspects fit the conditions. Where's the best feed? Where is reliable water? Where can elk bed with security? And where would pressure push them from the obvious version of all of this habitat to less obvious versions, right? If you don't narrow the seasonal bands, everything's going to look possible. And when everything looks possible, nothing gets hunted well, right? Once you've narrowed the seasonal band down and you've started looking for the complete elk system, now you can start talking about Maybe techniques and tools like calling. But this is where a lot of elk hunters get the order wrong. They start with calling instead of locating. They get frustrated, throw out a bugle, wait a minute, move a few hundred yards, bugle again, and repeat that pattern until they've burned through the morning. And sometimes that can work. I've been there. Sometimes a bull answers and the whole hunt changes. But calling by itself is not a locating system, or, in my opinion, not the most optimal locating system. It's just a tool inside of a locating system, a bigger system, right? A bugle can give you information. A cow call can confirm elk are close. A response can help you move faster or adjust your setup or close the distance. But if you're calling into random country without first understanding the feed, the bedding, water, wind, hunting pressure, and timing, you're just hoping sound solves a problem that the map and the mountain should have helped you diagnose first. So call from places where a response actually means something. Call from places where the wind and terrain give you a chance to do something with that response. A bugle isn't a plan, it's just information, and information only helps when you know what to do with it. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the Elk Hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the Elk Hunting E-book Series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post-rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory. It's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. And once you stop using calling as a shortcut, the next piece you have to understand is what happens when elk start reacting to people. Because a lot of hunters say the elk disappeared, when the truth really is the elk just adjusted. Pressure changes how elk use country. You can push them away from roads, trails, camps, glassing points, open parks, easy water, and obvious basins. But that doesn't always mean they moved 5 miles into some impossible canyon. Sometimes pressure only pushes elk just one layer deeper. They might slide into thicker timber, they might bed closer to escape cover, they might use the same drainage at night and vantage into a shaded bench during the day. They might move above hunters, below hunters, behind access, towards private boundaries, or into a pocket so ugly and inconvenient that a lot of people are just going to walk right past it and avoid it. The better question is, where can elk get the same things they need with less human contact? Feed, water, bedding, travel, wind, and pressure relief. That's the target. Pressure doesn't always remove elk from the mountain. It just changes where they feel safe using the mountain. So if pressure changes how elk use the mountain, your map work needs to account for that before the hunt ever starts. That's where I like to break elk country into 3 zones. The first zone is obvious elk country. These are the big meadows, easy glassing basins, major water sources, trailhead drainages, visible burns, named creeks on your map, and pretty north slopes that everybody else can see. Elk might absolutely use those places, especially before pressure, or at night, or during the right weather. But if it looks obvious to you, you have to believe that it probably looks obvious to other hunters too. Now, the second zone is adjacent security country. This is the timber, the benches, the side drainages, shaded cuts, ridge breaks, and escape cover that's connected to that obvious habitat. That's where elk can still use the same feed, water, and travel system, but with a lot more protection. Now, the third zone is the pressure refuge country. This is the ugly, inconvenient, harder to access, less obvious country that still has the full elk equation. That's the key. Don't just mark where elk should be when everything is perfect. Mark where they go when people start changing the game. And once you have those three zones marked, the next step is learning how to read what the mountain is actually telling you when you get there. This is where a lot of elk hunters make another big mistake. They find elk sign and immediately assume they found elk. But sign is not the answer, right? Sign is just a clue. Old rubs don't mean a bull is there today. Dry tracks don't mean elk are using that drainage in the daylight. A wallow doesn't mean a bull is about to walk in while you're sitting there. Scattered poop doesn't mean that you should spend 3 days camped on that ridge. Fresh sign absolutely matters, but only when you connect it to timing, direction, and purpose. So when you find sign, I want you to ask 3 questions. How fresh is it? Which direction were the elk going? And what were they doing when they were there, right? Were the elk feeding through at night? Were they leaving open feed and heading towards bedding? Were they using the saddle as a travel route? Were they bedded in that shaded pocket because the pressure pushed them there? The value of sign is not just knowing elk were present. The value is understanding what that sign tells you to do next. And when you start treating sign as information instead of confirmation, you finally have a way to reset the hunt when things aren't working. This is what I'd call the 24-hour elk diagnosis. When you can't find elk, don't just say there aren't any elk here. Slow down and run these questions. Am I in the right seasonal elevation band? Is there current feed nearby? Is there reliable water close enough to matter? Is there bedding cover connected to that feed and water? Can elk use wind or thermals to protect themselves in this country? What pressure has hit this area in the last day or two? And where would elk shift if they wanted the same resources with less human contact? Pressure, right? Then I ask the hardest question of all. Am I hunting where elk are during daylight, or am I only finding where they were at night? That one question can completely change everything. A meadow full of tracks might feel exciting, but if elk are only feeding there after dark and bedding a mile away in shaded timber, you haven't found your setup yet. You've only found the starting point. When you're struggling, don't just move faster either. You've got to diagnose better. And once you've run that diagnosis, the next decision is one of the hardest decisions in elk hunting. Do you stay or do you leave? And that's where a lot of elk hunters lose so much time, because both mistakes are expensive, right? Some hunters leave good country too soon because they didn't hear a bugle in the first hour. Other hunters stay in dead country for 3 days because they're emotionally attached to the plan they've built at home. So here's the difference. You stay when the system is still strong. Fresh tracks, fresh droppings, fresh beds, recent vocal activity, current feed, reliable water, good bedding cover, a pressure pattern that suggests elk should be close but hidden. Or maybe you simply haven't hunted the area correctly yet because the wind, timing, or access wasn't right. But you leave when the evidence starts falling apart. Old sign only. No fresh tracks where there should be fresh tracks. Water that's dry or ignored, not getting hits, not cloudy or muddy every day. Feed that no longer matters. Too much human traffic, too many hunters. A wind situation you can't solve, or habitat that looked great on the map but doesn't really make sense once you get there on the ground. Maybe it's just covered in rock or something that you didn't see initially. Persistence is powerful in the right system, absolutely. But persistence gets costly when you're just defending a dead plan. Now, when you finally make that stay or leave decision with evidence instead of emotion, now you can stop spiraling and build a reset plan for the next 24 hours. So start the morning from a place that gives you information. That might be a glassing point, a listening point, or a travel corridor where elk should be moving from nighttime feed towards daytime security. But don't just stare at the obvious openings. Watch those timber edges, the shaded cuts, the benches, the escape routes, the saddles and side drainages that connect the whole system. Use midday with purpose, not just napping, right? This is when a lot of hunters mentally check out, but midday can confirm or eliminate country. You could check water, check tracks, look for beds, poop, rub lines, wallows, shaded cover, and hunting pressure. You're not just wandering, you're collecting evidence and information. Then use the evening to hunt the best piece of that evidence and information that you collected. Set up where elk can leave bedding and head towards feed or water without exposing themselves. And make sure your wind and exit route don't ruin the next day. After dark, update your map. Mark what's fresh, what's dead, where pressure showed up, where the wind failed, and what deserves your attention tomorrow morning. A good elk hunter doesn't just hunt hard, he updates the plan every day. So when you put all of this together, I can't find elk starts to mean something a whole lot different. It's not the end of the hunt. It's not proof the unit's terrible, and it's not always a sign that you need to hike further, call louder, or completely start over. Most of the time, it just means something in the system hasn't been diagnosed yet. Maybe you're hunting old information. Maybe the seasonal ban changed. Maybe the feed dried up, or maybe the water moved. Maybe pressure pushed elk one layer deeper. Maybe you're standing in nighttime sign and expecting daytime elk. Or maybe the country looks good on a map, but the wind or the access or the security just didn't work when you were on the ground. The fix is to slow down, ask better questions, and hunt the current elk system. Finding elk isn't about guessing harder. It's about knowing what to check, what to eliminate, and where to go next. Now, if this episode made you realize you need a better elk plan this season, don't just watch another video and hope it all comes together. Build your plan now. If you want to study my full system on your own, start with my Elk Hunting series of ebooks. If you want daily guidance, accountability, and a place to ask your questions as season gets closer, join Team Backbone. If you want my eyes on your actual hunt plan before season, your maps, terrain, access, pressure points, wind, thermals, and strategy, book an Elk Hunt Plan Audit with me and I'll get you squared away. And if the missing piece is your body, your legs, your lungs, or your ability to handle the mountain miles and a heavy pack, check out my Backbone Unlimited training plans. But if nutrition is where you need more structure, whether that's getting leaner before season, fueling long days in the mountains, or building a better in-season food plan, check out my nutrition plans as well. The hunters who are ready in September are the ones who start tightening the plan now. Go to backboneunlimited.com and choose the path that fits where you are right now, and I'll get you started. Thanks for being here. I appreciate every single one of you, and I look forward to seeing you in the comments, probably my favorite part of these videos. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.